Good afternoon. I'm Carl Garth and welcome to our first Champion Chat of 2023 with Councillor Alison Champion. Good afternoon, Alison. How are you today?
Oh, Carl, I'm fantastic on this lovely sunny day. Thank you for asking, and welcome back, everyone, to a brand new year, 2023. Looking forward to the next year. No restrictions, no numbers, no counting numbers, no masks. Looking forward to it. Very exciting.
Absolutely, and we can travel a little bit too.
And we can travel. That's exciting as well. Yeah, we're looking forward to that. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, today we continue our series on social change and local government support, and we will be talking about urban food strategies. Considering, Alison, all the inflation that's going on at the moment, the price of food and, the shortages we see on the shelves, I think definitely this is a very topical subject for us to cover today.
Very, very much so. Yeah.
So probably a good place for us to start would actually be to let people know what actually is an urban food strategy and what does it cover.
So to keep it very simple, an urban food strategy is really simply just a process or a program to make sure that fresh, whole foods are available to all residents all of the time. And through various sources as well. And it's a sustainable process. It's not just a one-off. To make it a little bit more complex, it actually involves bringing people together. And they come through community groups, through workshops and feasts, communal feasts, and I'll touch on one of those that I attended a little bit later. Things like open gardens and hands-on experiences. So the idea of the urban food strategy is to connect, to share, and to learn.
And the thing I do notice about them is they seem very much locally orientated. Within each city, sometimes even within each suburb, rather than being a state or a federal-run initiative.
The concept certainly it comes from community. You're right. It does come from community, and I'm sure you read about, you look on a Facebook page, you'll look on, you'll see something in your letterbox. There's something in your letterbox that comes through, or there might be something in a publication that talks about the next food swap, for example. Food swaps are pretty common. And then you can obviously attend that if you want to. And that can be homemade foods, that can be just whole foods that are being sold. So yeah, it's certainly a back to some basics within community. And I don't know about you, Carl, but when I was growing up, I have talked about the compost bin being next to the incinerator back in the 70s.
Yeah.
But next to those two things in my backyard were two really big veggie patches. And I also had a lemon tree, and Mum and Dad planted a kumquat tree as well. And so I, along with probably a lot of people of our generation and older, grew up with these food supplies. And I remember Mum and Dad would actually keep an exercise book of recording of what they grew, what they reaped, and what they saved money on. So however much that particular food item cost in the fruit and veg shop at the corner, and it was on the corner, it was a fruit and veg shop on the corner. We didn't go to Woolies or anything. How much was that? And then that was what they calculated as how much money they actually saved on the groceries.
Yeah, no, I grew up in the country myself. So my grandparents, both sets of grandparents had apricot trees, apple trees, lemon trees, vegetable patches. My grandmother, one grandmother used to make some of the most fantastic jams, stewed apples, which were really great with your morning breakfast and things like that. The other grandparents, they had a chicken farm.
Yeah.
So again, yes, always was exposed to that a lot, as much as possible. Grow your own.
Yep, grow your own. And then if you didn't have anything, your neighbour might, and you might be able to swap with your neighbour. That's the urban food strategy on a bigger scale.
Yeah. Okay.
Bigger scale. Yeah.
And look, I understand that City of Banyule have been working on food strategy. We see it on the website. Able to let us know who Banyule have actually been collaborating with on this strategy?
Yeah, so we've been working with an organisation called Sustain, which is the Australian Food Network.
Okay.
So I'll expand on that a little bit. So that's an organisation that designs and builds sustainable and healthy food systems.
Okay.
And it doesn't do it sitting behind a desk and making it up and going, we know this, we'll put this into it. It's a case of, yes, they've got some knowledge and some skills and education. And what they'll do is they'll go and collaborate with all levels of government, as well as community and community leaders. And they map out local food systems and develop policies and programs around how communities use their food and where they get their food from and how they share it. Yeah.
Okay.
They also provide tools that empower councils and organisations, as well as people, residents, to support healthy ecosystems and healthy communities. So I'll give you some examples. So we've obviously put the website in our there's a link there to go to the website in this podcast.
Yes.
And if you click on that, you'll see a whole just article after article after article of what they've been doing, what these representatives have been doing. So an example might be, a couple of examples, say sort of in December, they submitted to federal parliament an inquiry into the food security in Australia. You'd have thought, food security in Australia.
Well, we've had a number of instances over the last couple of years of needles in fruit and things like that. So it is something to look out for. And
its availability, Anyway, so there's that. Things like in November there was an urban cultural forum in Canberra, and there was one in Sydney as well. Yep. There's articles on those, the outcomes. A government inquiry into food security across Australia. In June, Sustain was facilitating food security systems and in WA. So there's a report on that. And also they were protecting sustainably managed farmland. So there's an article or a report back on how to protect sustainably managed farmland. And gardening, talk about things like gardening as a reprieve from the pandemic. Things like an alternative to drugs, gardening being an alternative to drugs. And also things like the true cost of cheap junk food. And there's actually a book that's been written by a gentleman called Animal Vegetable Junk. And it covers that. And I know we'll talk about that shortly. And that's part of our report to council that's coming up very shortly. How cheap is junk food compared with whole food? And, well, it's not, but we know that. So there are those sorts of things. And the states, this is the work that Sustain is doing. And it works with communities and governments, 3 levels of government.
And so they obviously don't look at it as a one size fits all. They actually do go out and research with you.
Yes, they do. Right. Yes, they do. Yeah. And in December, I'm going to be referring a bit later. Beginning of December, I sat down with some of our community members at the Montmorency Community Hub, and we had dinner together. And the dinner was made by our residents, and we covered. We assisted with their project and their research that they're doing, which I'll talk about a little bit later.
Okay. So obviously we've had engagement with Sustain. Has there been any engagement with private enterprise on an urban food strategy?
I reckon that's a fantastic question, and I'm going to ask the question in response. What would be the point of private enterprise being involved in a strategy of any sort that is actually led by a community and the community's passion and interest in becoming successful?
And that's a great question back. Some it has to do with available funding. Sometimes it can also be, where does that private enterprise sit on the whole sustainability spectrum? So But then again, too, unfortunately, we also know that money can sometimes come with strings.
Mm. Yeah, and that's hence, yeah, the question: why would private enterprise be involved, whether they're invited or whether they choose to participate, and who would it be? Because really, look, this is personal from my angle. Surely we're now involved in a world, and we're in this now food insecurity position due to its availability, and its availability has been limited through cost, not items, not food items, but actually cost, via private enterprise, such as your fast food outlets.
Yeah, and you could even probably take that forward through to major supermarkets as well,
Yes, you could.
and the monopolies that they have.
Yes, you could.
Having said that, well, I agree with where you are right now. Who's to say there isn't a food equivalent of a Tesla out there looking to break the paradigm, find a different things.
Yeah, sure. So to come back to private enterprise in general, and we talk about money and strings, let's go with, what if there were a private enterprise organisation that was happy to just hand over the money or hand over profits every 12 months at the end of the tax year and go, here you go, you as a community use that for your urban food strategy. You as a community use that for your urban food strategy. Oh, and while you're at it, you don't need to market us.
Yeah.
You don't need to advertise.
When you find that group, just put them up on a pedestal, because we know how hard they are to find.
Yeah, and this is the thing, they're very hard to find, because the focus on private enterprise is often profit, and that's the sustainability of a private enterprise. It's the financial profit and looking after stakeholders, if there are any stakeholders involved, as in from a monetary point of view.
And look, I think the whole point, you said at the start, it's a community thing. It's about being self-reliant, not reliant on others. So,
one thing though that was brought up in the particular feast that I was at in December, one of my residents referred to a Terra Madre, which is essentially an organic foodstuffs outlet. Or it can be in shop or online, it doesn't matter, but it's organic foodstuffs essentially. That's, again, a Terra Madre still requires money to function, as well as the quality food or the organic foodstuffs. Yeah.
And look, it's interesting, being someone who tries to get as much organic food, is the fact that organic food seems to cost twice as much as non-organic food.
And that's the argument. Yeah, there's an argument there.
I really don't get, but anyway. Okay, so look, obviously we know that Banyule's been working on the food strategy into the website, and it actually does say that the consultation report was to be delivered this month. So are we still tracking to that timeline?
Yeah, we are. I actually found out this morning we definitely are, and council is likely to receive the report in the very near future. So there are some outcomes of that report that I can share with you. I spoke with our senior officers this morning just to confirm. So the report, so there was a survey online which you were able to contribute to, and the survey, 500 residents and staff contributed to the survey, along with about 150 community groups across Banyule. And the findings so far are really inspiring, actually very positive. The key outcomes of this survey actually align with Banyule's community vision, which is very exciting. So that kind of makes it quite certainly authentic. And supports it supports what we are as Banyule residents, or how we think and what we believe in as Banyule residents. There needs to be probably a little bit more feedback about the impact on First Nations peoples and children. So we'd need a little bit more about that somehow, some way.
Okay, so whilst we've got a good cross section already, we probably need to expand it a little more.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's maybe what's missing a bit, but that's something to work on. We've got the basics there, and it's something to work on moving forward.
Okay, so we've got the report coming. You've already got some insights there. What would you say would be the main challenge for councils when it comes to actually implementing the urban food strategy?
Yeah. From a personal level, just, running a household, running a family, working full time and so forth. We need, I just think so many of us need inspiration. So I think an inspiration of, I'd like to think all residents, it won't happen, but I'd like to think all residents, there needs to be some inspiration. So that's a challenge to inspire so many residents to become involved. So they would need to invest in the system and contribute to the system. And that becomes a time versus money thing in the end. So if you think about family life post-war, how we shopped, how we lived, it is so very different from how we do now for a variety of reasons. Yet the concept of running a family is the same. That hasn't changed. The concept of keeping a roof over your head hasn't changed.
Well, you talked about it earlier on. You said growing up, the corner grocery store, which has almost vanished from existence.
Almost, yeah. Almost gone. So I personally think it's just inspiring residents to become involved. Some feedback from our senior officer and the survey that's so far. Education is going to be big. We tend to make assumptions. And when I say we, I mean community as a whole. I don't mean a level of government in particular. So we tend to make assumptions about what people understand to be affordable, your favourite word, Carl, and healthy.
Yes, it's my favourite word.
So what's affordable, what's healthy? Define those two, and what's affordable or healthy for one family is not going to be the same for someone else. What's come out of this report so far? There are some new different socioeconomic groups who are actually asking for food relief. They're actually attending our food relief outlets, and the staff are realising we've never met these people before, which is not surprising considering our economic circumstances.
Oh, absolutely. And I think people would be very surprised to learn the socioeconomics of people who do need food help. It's not what everyone probably perceives of low economics. Sometimes it can be people who are what many people would perceive to be a median income family. Cost of living has now forced them to be making choices that in reality, in this day and age, we shouldn't be forcing people to have to make.
Absolutely correct. Yeah. And there's and that's the reality now. There are people choosing, right, I have X amount of dollars this month or this week. I have an electricity bill to pay, and I have food to put on the table, and I have school bills.
Yeah.
Which one of those am I going to use the money for? That's where people are at. And the thing is, that's new for some residents. That thought process is new for some residents. And then there are other residents for whom that has become common over the years, and they're used to that. And another challenge is educating those who are less fortunate and don't have the access that others might, to say the internet or some other media outlet, to know, okay, I've got this outlet that I can go to. I can go to Band 6. Some people don't know they can go to Band 6 for food. Some people don't know they can just pop into Watsonia Neighbourhood House or Green Hills Neighbourhood House and go and pick up some food. So that's a little bit of a challenge there, educating people as to what areas or what organisations are available. Encouraging collaboration as well. So I sort of touched on that. It's encouraging and understanding that it's not one organisation's responsibility to dictate to others and create a system and go, right, you all have to be involved in this now. It's not that. It's encouraging everybody to be involved in this. So we include local communities, community groups, agencies such as Sustain, the food relief outlets coming on board as well. And of course, they're on board. Food relief outlets are on board, and all levels of government. All levels, all three, include, and as well as all our community groups too. So there's a whole lot of bodies that need to be connecting together to ensure that the urban food strategy functions well for everyone and is effective for everyone. And one other thing too is just simply acknowledging and understanding what's involved in the urban food strategy or implementing it. So it is a shared agenda.
Yeah.
A shared agenda will create change, and it comes from within communities and people. It comes from within us. We have ideas, and the ideas are great, and then share them. So this is where it needs to be understood that this strategy is not dictated by a local council or a state government or a federal government. We don't like being dictated to. It's been reasonably clear over the last 2 to 3 years. What community wants and needs is have an idea and then know that there's maybe government support for it and advocation.
Yeah.
And the community groups are there as well to support and advocate and provide some sort of direction.
Be outcome focused, not process focused.
That's right. Yeah. And so they're the challenges there. It comes back to what we know, what we used to, and going, this is going to have to change if we're going to survive.
Well, it's interesting. If what we've talked about at the start, what we saw back post-war, and we're actually coming back towards some of that.
Yes, we are.
Alison, previously in the Champion Chat, we've talked about social enterprise initiatives. You've already mentioned a couple of organisations that are part of existing urban food strategies and will be part of it moving forward. Get a little bit of light on these organisations and any others you feel might be a good fit for an urban food strategy in Banyule.
Yeah. So you mentioned the social enterprises that we have, things like the organisations like the Little Social in Rosanna, Possum Hollow in Heidelberg. There's also For Change Cafe, so FOR, For Change Cafe in Belfield. Now that's in our new Belfield Community Hub, and that is actually going to be opening next month.
Okay, excellent.
Very exciting. So there's 3 examples of social enterprises which use food to sell, share with people. So those would be people or organisations to be involved heavily. Also neighbourhood houses. So I mentioned Watsonia and Green Hills neighbourhood houses. They have like food libraries. So we've seen book libraries.
Yep.
There are food cupboards actually out in the street.
Okay.
So you can walk into Watsonia neighbourhood house. You can walk into that, you can walk there, and near the entrance is a big cupboard with glass doors, like you have in a kitchen. It's been painted, and you can open that up and you go, oh, there are some lemons, I need a lemon. Okay. Oh, there's a tin of beans, I need some beans. And I've got an excess of, often lemons is an excess, so I've got an excess of lemons here. I'm just going to hand those back there. I don't need those lemons, someone else can have those.
Yeah.
Green Hills, you would actually go up to the window in Green Hills when it's open and just say, look, I really need, I don't know, a packet of pasta.
Yeah.
Or I really need some fruit. What sort of fruit do you have? Those are outlets that connect. So they may actually do. They already connect with and school groups.
And those groups you've just mentioned, Watsonia and Green Hills, I'm assuming that they would also be in touch with local supermarkets, etc. Any food that they can get from them rather than having it thrown out.
Any connections possible, like McLeod Community Garden. They actually provide food to Bansick.
Right.
So as well as and school kitchen gardens. So my boys were at Monty South, Stephanie Alexander Kitchen Gardens there. It's been very successful. It's very successful across a lot of schools. They sometimes provide fruit and veg to, say, Green Hills in this case, and also some small scale urban farmers. They also provide food. Okay. So a whole host of food accessibility, and it's just getting it to everybody, making sure everybody is able to access the food.
Yeah. Okay. The one thing we're going to have to be very mindful of in the future too is the need for water if we're going to be doing a lot of these local growings.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and of course we're all over, water tanks. We all they're part of they're becoming part of the construction infrastructure now. It's a requirement to have a water tank of some size on whatever you build, whether it's a community building or a personal house, personal property. There needs to be water tanks. So water saving is a significant underpinning feature of construction at this stage. Yeah. If you take a look also, while I think of it, when talking about Belfield and being a community building, there is a kitchen garden next to the community building. So it's actually on Department of Education and Training land, and that's state government owned land, and the community, runs the garden.
Okay. I'll have to.
So there's a bit of that going on as well.
Okay. Look, Alison, so obviously there's quite a lot of initiatives out there, both social and obviously, as the report comes out, there'll be a lot more over the next few years. How can members of the community get involved and help out?
Yeah. First of all, they have to choose to. So it's very much a personal choice to start with, and as I said, inspiration. But once that's achieved, you can actually connect with local community groups. There are many around across all councils, not just Banyule. You can find out your local community group where your food shares are. Things like you can always check in on the Banyule Council website. So if you just want to do some quiet desktop researching, there's the Banyule Council website. You can always go to related websites and Facebook pages. So one that was texted to me recently, the Food Collective Project, is a Facebook page. Okay, and there's information there. Sustain, we talk about Sustain, so that's sustain.org.au. Pop online and trust me, if you're interested, you're just going to be sitting and reading for hours. There is a whole lot of information on that site. Go to Food Swaps. Every now and then, I know there was one recently at the Monty Community Hub, but they'll be all over the place. Another good way is maybe to buy your fruit and veg at local farmers markets. So there's close to here is Eltham, St Andrews is another one. So there are a couple of really good examples, but they're very common now. No matter, even when you're on holiday, you can go to a farmers market. They're everywhere. You could also use your own backyard. So if you would like, you could set up your own veggie patch. You could plant your own fruit trees. And for those, there are people who say, but my land isn't very big, I just have a little courtyard. There are so many places that you can put a pot of herbs or grow. You can actually grow a citrus tree in a very small patch, because all you need is the soil and the fertilizer, and then you can actually, it doesn't have to be out like this. A fruit tree can actually grow up a wall, and you just cut it accordingly. Yeah. So there are good ways to learn how to grow food in a small place. And also you can also visit your local Terra Madre. We talked about those earlier in the time. So that's actually just terramadre.com.au. And you'll see something in Brunswick comes up as well. There's an organic fruit and veg in Monty, so they're around.
Do you want to tell us a little bit more about the Sustain Feast that you were talking about in December?
I can do that, yeah. So I've just brought up a few notes. So the gentleman from Sustain, there are a couple of staff from Sustain who sat with us, coordinated the feast and sat with us and took some notes, and then returned the notes to us. So we had a bit of a debrief. So there's the feedback from the residents who were in our feast lived sort of Montmorency, Watsonia, Briar Hill. And some have lived there for a long time, many, many years. Others have only just recently come to the community. They're all just passionate. We're all just passionate about eating well and healthy. So some thoughts that were presented were, here we go. So I'll talk about some key messages. Look, food is key. It's a really core part of our life. We talk about the kitchen being the heart of the house. It is. It always is. And if we don't eat it, we die. So we've got some suggestions that maybe the concept of food and healthy food and accessibility needs to be interwoven into all aspects of projects in our communities.
Yeah.
Climate change, it probably should be interlinked also with climate change. You talked about, accessibility to water.
Absolutely.
And yeah, so this is a climate change issue. So maybe interweave those. Sharing history, sharing culture. We've just had a talk about what it was like for us growing up, okay, and cultures do things differently. Actually, on the Sustain website, there's information about what's happening worldwide. And not long ago, there were protests in India about food availability. So there's an article there to read. Look, there was a point, and we've discussed it, there was a point made, look, it shouldn't be, the concept of food-related programs should be supported by local council and not dependent on volunteers, okay? Because volunteers can burn out, and I'm always saying how great our volunteers are. The world goes around because of volunteers, and if we were to sit down and calculate how many hours volunteers put into whatever they do, whatever role they do, however they contribute, and put some dollars on that, our economy would look very, very different. Yeah. So volunteers do what they love, but obviously they can actually burn out. So this is where council officers or government officers can help facilitate and communicate and support and grow, offer direction. Food is going to be a problem in the next few years. We've just discussed that. And a key thing, community does tend to ignore locally grown food. So again, that comes back to education.
Any reason why, you think?
It's what we know. It's partly media. It's partly media. Look, it's what we know. You and I talk about what we grew up with, and I know there are people listening who resonate with that. Our next generation, so our children and the next children, there's been so much media that they are aware of and that's thrown at them or they receive and they listen to, and they think that's the norm. Just as when we were growing up, it was the norm to grow your own food. So I just think that the media does play a massive role, as does private enterprise. And I think things were tipped in the 80s when we started, the dollar was floated on the stock market and there was a lot more money going around in the 80s, and we could do a lot of things. And we're still encouraged to trade. And trade not just locally but bigger, elsewhere, across the country, across other countries, internationally. And there's a place for that. There absolutely is a place for that. But when it comes to something like food, it's very precious. It's becoming a precious commodity.
Well, I think something that's of note is most other countries want our food. So why are we giving it away? Why are we trading it away when, we are struggling for people to put food on the table? Farmers are ploughing crops under. That again, things that I'm not really understanding why they're happening.
Yeah. And does that come back to the concept of private enterprise?
I think there's definitely a linkage there.
So.
And I don't think that's to say that we want to sit there and bash private enterprise, but I think we've also got to, the whole idea of sustainability is long-term good for everybody.
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly right. For everybody is key. And the thing is, the other thing too is food preservation. So we have freezers and fridges, but then we've also got use by dates and use best before dates. Now, I know the difference. I don't know that everybody else knows the difference. There is actually a difference in a commercial world. There's a difference. In your own home, you do whatever you like, and you've got consequences for whatever you like. So food preservation, how many people actually, again, have the time or make the time to make jams or preserve fruit? And this is a topic that we covered in our feast. We discussed this. How many people are preserving their food? They're not. They're not, because it's so accessible. We ran out, we'll get another one. oh, that's off. We've got a compost bin. We'll stick it in the compost bin and we'll just go and get another one. So there's that. So these are sort of the things that we covered. What else? We talked about that. Again, support this is a volunteer thing, so support the volunteers as much as possible, and it does come back to every single resident needs to contribute in order to make this as effective as possible, and there needs to be a different role for the private sector or the private enterprise sector or the commercial sector when it comes to food, because it's becoming precious.
Absolutely. Well, it is becoming precious. We can't say there's not enough food. I just think it's the way we use our food.
Yeah, agree. And look, I do still say to my boys when they're hungry, I just say, oh, you're in Australia, you're not going to be starving.
No.
But
look,
discuss, debate.
Look, I think it's going to be a very interesting next 5 to 10 years. Our population rising and rising quickly. Melbourne will be 6 million people before the end of the decade. Yeah, so when you look at the prices and how do we effectively feed our people?
And you talk about prices with regards to organic food. You were saying, why should it be more? There is a perception that farmers market produce is more expensive than a supermarket. I don't think so. I actually don't think it is. And I've got to say, I bought a cauliflower from Eltham Market a couple of weeks ago, and it tasted like a cauliflower.
I might clarify my point there.
Please do. Yeah.
So I'm talking more if you buy an organic food through our lovely private enterprises, spend a bit of time in California, and organic supermarkets over there are actually cheaper than normal supermarkets. And a lot of that's got to do with subsidies and taxation that happens in California.
Okay.
Things that are preserved versus things that are organic. We don't have that over here.
Yeah.
So
okay.
Something that's organic, you are, and it's crazy because it's got actually less in the production of it, less of the preservatives, less pesticides, etc., and it's more expensive.
And I know that's illogical. Yeah, that's illogical because it takes less to create or grow that particular produce. So, yeah, so is it about the food or is it about a different kind of agenda?
Exactly.
Yeah. And you know what? There are other questions there. One of the residents actually just said, well, look, is this whole urban food strategy, does this come from, is it a bottom up or a top down issue? Because we live in a society where, we've got rules and regulations, we've got to follow those rules, that legislation, and how much can community actually contribute and how big a voice can community be? And it was suggested, well, in this particular case, surely it can be an active partnership between communities and, she did say council, but it can be any government level. And that's exactly what it has to be. It has to come from community, and then your local government or state government or federal government then come on board and we discuss and we work out a strategy and a direction. Yeah.
Yes. Well, thank you for your time today, Alison.
My pleasure, Carl. I was happy to be here again. Nice to be back.
Absolutely. And thank you all for listening to this podcast. If you would like to know more about the organisations in Banyule already helping with urban food strategies, you can check out the links in the notes of this podcast, or you can visit the Banyule City website, which has pages, Alison, on sustainable food.
Yes, it does. Yeah.
Fantastic. All right. Well, join us next time on the Champion Chat for the next podcast in our series on social change and local government support. And Alison, it'd be really great if we could revisit the urban food strategy in probably the next 6-7 months once things have started to be implemented.
Yeah, absolutely. So November is the month for urban food and the strategy. So that's the focus is in November. And so we could probably love to do something maybe October-ish, just to remind people that that's happening. And we'll obviously have more feedback about the report, Banyule's report, how it is in Banyule.
Brilliant. Okay. Thank you very much. And thank
Thanks,
you.
Carl.
Bye, Alison.